Good morning. This is Barry Bailey,
Tasha Humphrey.
and you're joining us for Under Pressure. This morning we have a special guest who is going to talk to us about something that we rarely talk about, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll get into the conversation about what he's doing here, and then we'll ask him some questions.
Thanks, Barry. My name is CP Mirarchi, and I run Genesis gambling treatment program, and thank you for having me on your show.
Certainly. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on the show is to ask you some very specific questions. Now, I think this month is
National Gambling Awareness Month.
Okay, National Gambling Awareness Month, which is a specific month to bring attention to the gambling-related issues.
You know, gambling just became a full-fledged addiction. Back when it was introduced, it was called pathological gambling, and in 1980 it was introduced into the DSM. So the people would see that it could be a problem, and but it was an impulse control disorder at that time, and quite frankly nobody really paid attention to it. Then in 2013, some 33 years later, they realized that pathological gambling, or compulsive gambling as it's called, is a true addiction. And they took it from the impulse control disorder and moved it over with drugs and alcohol where it should have been 35 years ago.
Okay, can you just kind of explain to our audience, when you say they and the DSM, what does that mean?
The DSM is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's sort of like the Bible of psychology and psychiatry. So if anybody was diagnosing somebody all over the world, they would look at the symptoms, they'd be able to identify one thing, whether you were in the United States or abroad or in Canada or wherever. And quite frankly, it's addiction that's pretty devastating, because you talk about drugs and alcohol. You can only drink so much before you fall off a bar stool,
Right.
or shoot up so much before you're found in an alley. But in your lunch hour, you can go over to a casino or go in a store and buy scratch-offs and be hundreds or thousands of dollars behind. And then that in turn affects your family and everything else.
So, I mean, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that it's not very easy to recognize someone who's struggling with compulsive gambling at the onset.
That's absolutely true, because like most addictions, compulsive gamblers lie, and you have to lie in order to keep your addiction going, because once you come out with the truth, then you're stuck on working on it.
Right.
And God forbid they should work on it. So usually it waits until something really bad happens. Even though it's not about how much you lose, usually you're not going to ask for help until you're way behind in your bills and you feel like you're drowning.
And now, if I also heard you correctly, there's a new awareness of treating compulsive gambling, and if I'm not mistaken, because I did do a little bit of research, that awareness is now reaching a national proportion.
They, when I was back in school, and that was late, because I didn't get my master's until 2009, 2010. And when we were researching, they said the best way to treat gamblers was through a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and using the 12 steps. And a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists and mental health officials do use cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. I like to use the 12 steps in addition to that, because it gives more of awareness of how to treat the gambler, I think.
And when you say the 12 steps, you're talking about a self-help program, 12-step base, which was the original 12-step program, is AA. So you're talking about a GA program.
That's exactly what it is. Back in 1935, Dr. Bob Bill W. Came up with these 12 steps, and they're used throughout every anonymous program that goes on. And I understand there's more than 60 or 70 or it could be even more. But in 1957, two recovering alcoholics got together and said, hey, if this works for alcohol, it'll probably work for gambling. And it's grown since then.
So there are rooms that for gamblers.
Oh, absolutely. There's now there's not as many as AA.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you would think, Jesus, it's been going on 58 years. How could there not be that many rooms? But like I said, a lot of people don't come to grips with gambling. First of all, it's legal. Second of all, we get bombarded with it, by the church, by the state, and the lotteries. You got to play to win. Why don't you buy a couple more tickets? You're going to help some old person get medicine. And people think, hey, let me go do that. Let me do my part to help. And that's okay for 95% of the people. But that 5% that's in trouble really gets hurt.
Like I find I want to ask you some of the red flags. Like say for instance myself, if I go to, for example, I went to Vegas and I just wanted to keep playing, even though I lost, I wanted to keep playing and try to win my money back. Like, is that?
Not necessarily, because on the way home, if all you're thinking about is, I got to go get some more money so I can get back to Vegas and get my money back, it sort of has to disrupt your life like any addiction. It's not just, if you could pick up and say, I lost, I'm going to wait till I recoup, and maybe I'll go back again, fine. When it's on your mind, like a true addiction is on your mind almost 24/7. When you can't think of anything else, when it interferes with your home life, when it interferes with work, when it interferes with everyday thinking, then you know you have a problem. And there's questions that are on the internet. There's 20 questions that you can ask yourself. There's 10 in the DSM. Now they changed it, when it went to an addiction, they changed it to 9. So if you have 4 out of 9 in the DSM, if you have 7 out of 20 questions in Gamblers Anonymous, and you can just go online and test yourself and see. But the important part is you have to be honest with yourself. Because a lot of people will look at the questions and say, that really doesn't pertain to me, when in fact it does.
So the next question I had that's very much related to that is, we're consistently dealing with levels of denial when we're treating individuals with various disorders. How does the level of denial with gambling compare to those of, say, substance abuse or?
Well, like I said, I think it goes a little deeper, because you're going to justify, I have the money to handle this, okay? And so people with more money are going to take longer to realize they have a problem, because they can say, I can afford this. Mm-hmm. And the denial is going to be that it's interfering with their family life, and they're going to say, how could that be? I pay my bills on time, I provide for my family, so it's not really that bad. There's a famous sportscaster who does TV shows that says, I don't have a problem because I could afford to do it. My answer to that would be, if anybody remembers Leonard Toews, he used to own the Eagles and Toews Trucking Company. And back in the 70s, 50 million was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Not that it's not now, but you can imagine. And to die penniless in a hospice, you're thinking, what is he thinking when all that money starts to disappear? And I still got 10 million left. I'm not going to run out of this. But it gets to the point where, there's a lot of shows on the HBO, 30 on 30, where you see athletes especially, they come into this newfound money and they go crazy with it, and there's a lot of people, there's a lot of athletes, because, and they bet on sports, a lot of them, but they think because I know about this, I almost have like an inside track as to what's going on, and the money just starts disappearing.
So who do you see with your counseling, or just in general when you're looking at reviews? Who do you see more, women or men, like age ranges?
It's funny you said that. I'm also in a 12-step program myself, and I came into the Gamblers Anonymous program when I went into a rehab in 1984. And back then, you saw very, very, very few women. Back in 1984, Atlantic City only had 6 years worth of gambling, because it was introduced into Atlantic City in 1978, and it usually took a long time for somebody to become a compulsive gambler. You used to see racetracks and that, people that go all the time. But with the addition of the casinos, and people could go every day, with the addition of the lotteries, and especially you see they have more and more games. Now scratch-offs is a big thing. But now I think it's 1/3 of the women, 1/3 to 40% of all compulsive gamblers are now women, where that's growing at an alarming rate. Especially in New Jersey now. About a year and a half ago, I think it was Thanksgiving night of 13, online gambling was introduced into Jersey. And it hurts a lot of people. Imagine going to work, coming home, and here's your wife frying chicken and cutlets, and she says, I got to sit down and talk to you. Because he says, how was your day? She says, I lost $1,300. He said, wait, all you did was clean the house and make chicken cutlets. How could that be? Because they sit at the computer, and I've seen, and I've treated people that get overwhelmed, and they start chasing. Oh, I couldn't afford to lose that $100. I got to get that back. So they take another 100 to go get that, and another 100. And they call that term chasing. And the next thing you know, you're just out of control. So it's really a sickness. So it's not like you go to the casino one day, you say, I'm only going to lose $200, and then you get angry when you lose the 200, and you say, I'll chase it with another 3. But then if you could say, you know what, I'm done, I'm walking away, you probably don't have a problem. It's that obsessive thought pattern where I got to get back, I got to get that money back, I got to recoup my losses.
And you touched on this a little bit, but I want you to talk about the effects, because we're talking about gambling as it relates to a diagnosable medical issue. What are the effects that it actually has on the family? What kind of pressures and stress does a compulsive gambler contribute towards the family dysfunction?
Well, look at it like one day the kids aren't doing well in school, and you're trying to figure out why. And normally they're good students. You can't understand it, so you're going to work on an angle where let's get these kids tested, let's see what's going on. But you find out when you start peeling back the onion, the reason they're not doing well in school is because mommy and daddy are always fighting. Now we got to figure out why mommy and daddy's always fighting. Well, there's never enough money to do what we want to do or have to do. Yeah, but we both work, we both make money. We shouldn't be this way. It's not going to be till you get to the very end that you're going to find out that there's something propelling this. And a lot of times it's an addiction. But nobody's going to come out and say, this is what it is. Because once you identify something as a problem, you're almost compelled to fix it, or else you're going to be reminded by your spouse or your employer or something, or a judge if it gets to that level, hey, here's a problem that you recognize that you have to do something about it. So as long as I don't admit there's a problem, I'm okay.
So, now, I know that there's forums that families can use when they are coming into substance abuse treatment, or maybe they're dealing with some level of an individual in their family that's dealing with some mental health issues. How do you, is there a way to treat the family of a compulsive gambler also?
Sure, and a lot of times you hear from the family first, Barry. There's a number in New Jersey, 1-800-GAMBLER. That's probably the most easily recognizable number. You see it on billboards, you see it on advertisements, you see it all over. In the casinos, you see it on lottery machines. So that's run by the New Jersey Council on Compulsive Gambling. If you call that 1-800 number, they will direct you to either Gamblers Anonymous, or they will ask where you live if you want treatment. And they will give you an area that you live in that will provide free treatment.
Okay.
So there are funds put aside by the state of New Jersey. In fact, all the states that have gambling have to put money aside for treatment. In New Jersey, not only does that funding treat the compulsive gambler, but family members also. Because you hear family members, they become obsessed, or what we call codependent. How do I know she's not gambling? How can I trust my wife again? She's always lying about this. Money is disappearing. So, there's a lot of anger issues, there's a lot of trust issues, there's a lot of issues thinking that you're betrayed because of the trust, and those people need help too. Now, a lot of them come in the beginning and they say, well, that's not my problem. I don't have that addiction. Well, but you have what's left over, because the addict makes the person they're with questionable to go towards a codependency.
So they have to begin the process of really, there's really no real difference between someone who is, let's say, a COA, and someone who is dealing with a parent who has an addiction, or a spouse who has an addiction.
I think
A child of an alcohol, children of alcohol.
I think one day you're going to see codependency in the DSM
Right,
too,
that's right.
because it's almost like an addiction.
Yeah.
And because that person thinks, what can I do to control the drug addict? What can I do to control the alcoholic? What can I do to control the compulsive gambler? And the answer is you can't do a damn thing. But by you focusing on the addiction and the addict, you're going to miss a lot of life, and it's not good.
So now, just so we can kind of frame for anybody who might think or who might be concerned that they may need some help, can you just go over the conversation we had at the beginning, the questions, where people can find the...
Sure. First of all, you can just go on the internet, and whatever search engine you have, you type in compulsive gambling, or you can go to 1-800-GAMBLER, and that'll connect you right to the New Jersey Council. Now, Rutgers is also starting a program, and that's run by Dr. Nick Armenti, and that's going to be up and running very shortly, where there's funding available to treat the gambler, and some of the monies to treat gamblers is going to go to the family members, and that's going to be controlled, so to speak, by the New Jersey Council. So all you have to do is remember, let me call this 1-800-GAMBLER number, or let me go on my computer or my iPhone and check 1-800-GAMBLER. You'll be able to click a box that says, here's the questions if you have a problem, here's the questions if the family has a problem, and you'll be able to, that number will be able to direct you for treatment. Now, even if you have insurance, if the insurance doesn't cover gambling, the funds are there, because, like I said, the casinos have to give millions of dollars a year to the state in order to finance treatment, education, and prevention. And, you know, it's a good thing that they're doing because, you know, not that it causes the problem, but if somebody already has the problem, it's going to exacerbate it, and you're going to need to know where to go get help.
Okay, one last question for you. On average, how many people would you say during the course of a year you treat?
Between the gambler and the families, it's over 100. It's big because, like I said, people are really starting to understand that this is a problem. And the statistics show the closer you live to a casino, the higher the prevalence rate is for it affecting people. And if you live about a stone's throw from where we're sitting right now, you could probably hit at least a half a dozen casinos. And if you're willing to drive down the shore, you could add another half a dozen or more. So,
Okay, it's a very interesting topic, and certainly we want to bring everyone's attention to, we're about to the end of the month, but this has been National Compulsive Gambling Awareness Month. We want to thank CP for coming on.
my pleasure.
And we want to tell you again, if you happen to need some help and you have watched or listened to the show, CP is available at our office at Genesis Counseling Centers, Collingswood, Marlton, and Camden. Thank you for listening and watching. This has been Under Pressure with Barry Bailey.
Natasha Humphrey.
Thank you very much.
Like us on Facebook.